Today we're going to start Samachas Beis. It's about 8 lines from the bottom. Ve'ima nivala lepasala chayvi krisis. Basically, what we're holding right now in the Gemara is that we use the pasuk. Pasuk says, "V'chol zar leyechal kodesh." I'm sorry. Baskain kisila ish zar. There's another pasuk. It says Baskain kisila ish zar. That means if a Kohen's daughter will be married to an outsider, so the pasuk says she may not eat of the separated holies, which means she can't eat shuma. So we learned that means not only that if she's married to a Yisrael or to a Levi, but even if she has relations to a zar, an outsider, someone that will invalidate it, that's going to be also that she can't go back to her father's house to eat truma. Same would apply is that she can't marry a Kohen either. If someone that was puzzled, that would make her puzzle, and then she can't eat truma over there either. Okay, now the Gemara says, "Ve'imin nivla lepasala," when it says that if she has relations with someone that's a zar to her, which we said was puzzle, maybe that's referring to chayvi krisis. Maybe that's referring to those close relatives that are relations with one of them. Type of incest, that would be puzzle. The Gemara said, in other words, as opposed to the list that we just gave, which was, we had a list of over here of a geram, a kuti, and a mamzer, and a whole bunch of people that were negative prohibitions, not chayve krisis, just thou shall not, right? So the Gemara says kisiya amar rachmana. It says kisiya. The Gemara uses the term, this verb to be, as marriage. So kisiya is a term for marriage. And what does that tell me? Hanach dispu havaya chayvi krisis lavnei havaya. It has to be someone that marriage is possible. Chayvi krisis, if someone gives a sister a ring or something, that's not going to be. That's not a marriage. It's not like you need a divorce over there. I don't know if a sister's chayvi krisis, whatever. So it has to be something that a marriage is effective. Ihachi. Okay, now you're getting like particular about this. That when is she not allowed to eat shuma? It's only if a marriage would have worked, and she had relations with someone that was prohibited. But prohibited in a way that had they gotten married, it would have been a marriage that would have required a divorce. If that's where we're holding, so then, so let's take it back, exactly the opposite logic of what we just said. Let's take it back to maybe, the Gemara jumps to another example. It didn't need to. The Gemara could have kept with the same example that we're using. Let's say chayve krisis, something where a marriage doesn't take effect, is not going to invalidate her. First we wanted to say maybe it's only chayve krisis. So we said no, not chayve krisis. It's only something that's a negative prohibition like malchus. So we say, okay. So then maybe let's go the other way. Maybe chayve krisis, she's still acceptable, permissible to go back to her father's house after she had relations with a close relative. And let's take the example of the Gemara now, or a slave or a non-Jew, which they cannot make a real marriage on a Jew. They're not marriageable. So she should be allowed to eat truma. The Gemara says no. Hanach, what you just suggested, I have another source for. So in others, kisiya would not tell me that, because kisiya only tells me something that's someone that's marriageable. Hanach pasni mid Rabbi Yishmael, Dam Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, says, Minayin leibit kachav me'abed shabal bas Yisrael val kehenes levia shapaslua. How do I know that a non-Jew or a slave that lives with a Jewish girl, a kehenes or levia, that it invalidates her from eating truma? Kehenes from her father's house, and Yisraelis and Leviah from the new house, from the marriage, from eating Truma from her husband's house. Okay, now the pasuk over here says, this is last week's parsha, Chaf Beis, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. Pasuk Yud Beis says, "Ubas kain kisiel leirzar." That means a bas kain that will be married to an outsider, which we're translating now to mean will have relations with someone that's marriageable but forbidden to her. He b'trumas hagadashim leisaychel. She cannot eat from the separated holies, which means she can't eat truma. Pasuk Yud Gimel says, "Ubas kain kisiel almana grusha." A bas kain who will become a widow or a divorcee, v'zera ein la, and she doesn't have any children from her husband that just passed away or divorced her. B'shavel beisavia kinareh, she'll go back to her father's house, and as she was in her youth, milechem avia teichel, she'll eat from the bread of her father, which means she can now eat truma again. If she goes back, the marriage dissolved, she goes back to her father's house, she can eat truma as long as there's no children there. We said kinureh, we added in once, we said not when she's pregnant. We said if she's kinureh only as she was as a youth. Okay. And then we added in another v'chol zar lo yochel by, and that we learned, we used that yesterday, that pasuk. So what Rabbi Yishmael is doing, and Rabbi Yochanan is quoting this, he says, Kisi almana grusha. If she's a widow or a divorcee, she can go back to her father's house. That's misheyesh almana segrusha ba. Who can go back to the father's house after a marriage to eat? That's only someone, that would be a widow or a divorcee. They don't have widowhood and divorcee because they don't have the marriage. So we have another source. We have another source to say that a woman would be prohibited to eat truma if she had relations with a non-Jew or a slave. A different source than the one that we were using before, if it would just be someone that was a prohibited marriage. Okay. Ashkechan Kehenes. So far, what you've taught me was that the Bas Kayan is going to be invalid if she has relations with invalid for Truma if she has relations with a slave or a non-Jew. Leviah Yisraelis minalan. How do you know that a girl that from her father's house is only a Levi or a Yisraelis? She's supposed to eat Truma because she's getting married or she is married.
Is that considered prohibited also, Yisrael or Levi? Because I know
the Yisrael and Levi are not allowed to eat Truma. Only right. But now she's going to get married to a Kayan, or she is married to a Kayan. And the question is if she can still eat Truma.
Right.
Let's say she has children and the marriage is over. That's one option. Or if she would have relations with someone that's puzzle, she would become puzzled as a Zaina. So she wouldn't be allowed to get married. But let's say it was rape. No, then she would still be a Zaina, right? By a Kayan. That's only if she was married. Then rape is a problem for a Kayan. Let's say she was never. Oh, it would still puzzle her, I think. Okay. So I guess the case would be that she's married. She has a child. She's married to a Kayan. She has a child, and the husband dies, and the child that's there is a Kayan, right? Because her husband was a Kayan. She's supposed to be able to eat Truma because of her son, and now she's puzzled because she just had relations with someone that's puzzled. But we only have that source for a Kayanes, a Bas Kayan. What about if she's a Leviah or Yisraelis? So it says, Kadamar Rab Abba Amarav Bas Ubas Hachinami Bas Ubas. It says we did this once before already. It says, Ubas Kain Kisi Elirsar. The following pasuk says, Ubas Kain Kisi Almana Grusha. Why does it have to say Ubas again? Well, actually, I'm jumping ahead of the Gemara. First, it says Ubas, and and the bas kain. So the Gemara says, come on, Rabbi Akiva the Darshvavi, like we said yesterday, that is this following Rabbi Akiva that says that the extra vav gets darshan, that is coming to teach us that it applies also to a Yisraelis and a Levia. The Gemara says, I feel it came a Rabbanan. Not necessarily. You could say it's even following the Rabbanan. And Kula Baskra Yisera. This Gemara is a quote from yesterday's Gemara, that maybe yesterday quoted today's. That the whole pasuk is extra, because if it's going to say Ubas Kayan twice, 2 psukim in a row, then the second pasuk could have said like this. It could have said Ubas Kayan, the first pasuk, Ubas Kayan Kisiel Ishzar, and then it could say V'chisi Almana Grusha, and I would have known I'm talking about the Bas Kayan from the last pasuk. Why does I have to say the whole thing? It's coming to teach me not only the Bas Kayan, but even Levi in Israel, Levia in Israelis. Gemara says, "Veima mishi yesh le almanas v'gerushin ba ki les le zera ka'achla ki es le zera lo yachla mishi ein le almanas v'gerushin ba afal gavdes le zera nami techel." That's an interesting question. This is an interesting question. According to this, where are we getting our source that relations with a non-Jew is going to invalidate a woman from eating truma? We said we're getting it from, if a bas kayan is a widow or a divorcee, if she doesn't have a child, she goes back to her father's house. That's coming to tell me that it's only someone, if she had relations with someone that would have made her into a widow or a divorcee. But if it would have been someone that that's not marriageable because non-Jew or a slave, then she can't go back to her father's house. No, 1 second. There was a small detail in that verse that said she goes back to her father's house if she didn't have children. Maybe what it means is that when does she go back to her father's house if she doesn't have children? That's only if she had relations with someone that's marriageable. But if she has relations with someone that's not marriageable, then she goes back to her father's house even if there are children. How do you know which detail is the one is getting excluded? We were trying to say before it excludes the whole thing, but maybe it's only excluding the detail of the children versus no children. Let's do that again. Someone that's marriageable, which means could have widowhood or divorceehood. If there are no children, she returns to her father's house and eats truma. But if there are children, then she can't go back to her father's house because she was married to a regular Yisrael, and she can't go back to eat truma in her father's house because she has children. However, which means like a guy or an eved, a non-Jew or a slave, even if there is children, nami techel, she should also eat. Now, what's the logic in that? She lived with a non-Jew, or she lived with an Eved Kanani. So we were saying that she's totally puzzled, but maybe not. Maybe that relations is not even considered a relations. Maybe it's considered nothing. It would be example. It's like she lived with an animal. Yeah. Right. So it wouldn't be considered like, I don't know, she can't have children with the relations with an animal, right? That doesn't match scientifically. But we don't consider that like anything. We don't consider that like it's nothing. Okay. The Gemara says, what is the limud now telling me? The limud is taking the other extreme. It's going lenient. Yeah.
This has nothing to do with her conceiving in any capacity. It's only about relations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, what we just threw in the factor is if she had a child, then that.
But the
holds her.
child, all of that is all from prior. It's not from that relation. That's
Right.
written.
Right.
So it's nothing to do with conception.
Nothing
It's
with
only
conception
about.
right now. Correct.
Okay.
You see the trophy? This is all virtual behind me. It just pops up.
Literally, when she to her father's house, she lives the other side of the world.
Yeah.
She's still eligible for treatment.
Yeah.
I think that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. Can she go to other relatives' house, not only eat truma from other? Right. Can she live anywhere and eat truma?
She's being supported by the father. Is that
Yeah.
what it's saying?
Yeah. I understood that it just means that she goes back to her father's house. She goes back to her old status.
You know, it's that.
Doesn't mean that she has to actually eat the truma that her father is getting.
So she can get treatment from
She moves into her brothers or whatever, she can eat over there too, or
any
cousin.
source, even someone who's not a relative.
That's what it's. That's what I would imagine. Yeah. Okay, if we're taking this in this direction, that this pasuk of widowhood and divorceehood is teaching me not that we have to be strict, that only someone that's marriageable will allow the woman to go back and eat truma. But someone that's not marriageable will not allow it. That would be the strict way. But someone that would not allow. If we were going that way, then we understand what's happening. We're being strict on a non-Jew, on a relationship with a non-Jew that you can't eat truma. But if we take it this way, the way we just took it, that the strict one is the one that is marriageable. Almana Grusha tells me, oh, that's going to be the strict one. If she has a child, then she can't go back. But if there's not marriageable, then even with a child, she can go back. We're taking it on a lenient approach. Riboy Levia v'Yisrael Islamali. We just said that ubas kayan, the extra bas kayan, is coming to include even if it's not a bas kayan, because it has an extra word. It's coming to teach me, even if it's Yisraelis or Levia, that she can't eat truma as well. Now, 1 second. If you're trying to tell me to go strict, that if she has relations with someone that's marriageable, she's still able to eat truma. But if she has relations with someone that's not marriageable, she can't eat truma. So then it's coming to add in that if the bas kayan has such a relations, she can't eat truma. It's only if someone that's marriageable. But if you, okay, however, then we would add in that not only a bas kayan, but also if it's a Levi, bas Levia, or a Yisraelis that has relations with someone that's not marriageable, also can't eat truma. Okay, it's invalidating her as well. But if we're going lenient, we said that a kayanes, a bas kayan, is still eligible to eat truma with someone if she has relations with someone that's not marriageable. So do you have to then tell me that a bas Yisrael and a Levia also is able to? If the Kehenes was able to, even though she's become defiled, the Levia and the Yisraelis are less defiled. So for sure she should still be allowed to eat truma. So why do we have to include even with a child? Even with a child, or without a child also. When do I make a distinction between child and no child? That's only marriageable. But non-marriageable, there's no distinction. So then you have to include the Levia as well. You don't need an extra pasuk for that. It would be obvious that she would still be eligible if we're taking this in the lenient approach. The fact that we have an inclusion for the bas Levi must mean that we're going on the stricter way. And we're saying that someone that's not marriageable invalidates the Kehenes. But not only that, it even invalidates also the Levia and the Rabbi Akiva Damarin Kedushin. Yeah, that all of that explanation was in that one line. Imkain Riboy Levia v'Yisrael Islamali. That line was. Yeah.
Having relations with a Levi is marriageable.
No, 1 second. A non-Jew with the daughter of a Levi, that was not a
There's
possible
no
marriage.
to begin with.
I know, but let's say this lady was one time married to a Kohen. The Kohen died. She has a child. She wants to eat Truma because of the child. Now she has relations with a non-Jew.
Right.
She should become invalidated. Now, and we're saying that she doesn't become invalidated. Well, if she was a Kohen, if she was a Kohenes, a Bas Kohen, then she would be invalidated. But only if she would. If she was a Kohen, she also wouldn't be invalidated because it was a non-Jew.
Right. It's not just nothing.
Right. So it must be that this is not the way we're approaching this.
Oh.
And we're saying that the non-Jew is not nothing. A non-Jew actually does invalidate her. And it not only does invalidate her, but invalidates the Leviah and the Israelis as well.
Whoa.
Okay.
Wonder our grandmas were so strict.
Oh, yeah.
who you dated or what you saw.
At every family, every Thanksgiving dinner, the grandmother would announce, don't marry the whole family. Yeah, the Sfardim don't know about this, but in the American Ashkenazic world, that was the Thanksgiving dinner speech from the grandmother. Right?
It was the only exposure she had to those children at that one time they were all
Right.
together.
Okay. Oler Rabbi Akiva Damar in Kedushin tapes and B'chai V'Lavin. Now, this is going to throw us off a little bit. One of our psukim here that we were using to tell me that a woman gets invalidated from eating truma in her father's house was the pasuk that said, if a bas kohen will get married to an ish zar, to a stranger, she can't eat truma anymore. And we learned that to mean that not only if she gets married, but even if she has relations with someone that would invalidate her, is also can't eat truma. So why does it say marriage? Kisiya. We said someone that's eligible for marriage. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, any prohibited relations is not eligible for marriage. So we've just lost the whole pasuk. So it says like this: Rabbi Akiva Damrein Kedushin Teifsim B'chai V'Lavin, my kisiya lish zar kitibal. What does it mean kisiya? It just means have relations. So almana grusha lamali. If it just means, if kisiya doesn't mean marriage, according to Rabbi Akiva. So it must mean just to have relations. So then we needed a special pasuk to teach me someone that wasn't marriageable, because kisiya meant marriage. So we needed a special pasuk for the slave and the non-Jew. What was that pasuk? Almana grusha. Widow and, so almana grusha goes in quotations over here. Like that pasuk of almana grusha was teaching me the non-Jew and the slave. According to Rabbi Akiva, a non-Jew and a slave is just like every other forbidden relations, which none of them are marriageable. So what do I need almana grusha for? Kisiya itself taught that to me. Gemara says, well, it's not so simple. Almana lahachmer la grusha lahakal la tzricha. My logic would have told me that there's a difference between a widow and a divorcee, and we would have taken this in two different ways. And the Gemara is going to explain. The Yashmin and Almana. Let's say the pasuk only said that a widow goes back to her father's house, the Kohen, and to eat truma. Almanahu dechilas leizera achla mishum dechasi lekuna. A widow should, by right, go back to her father's house to eat truma, because she can marry another Kohen anyway.
Without children, obviously.
Yeah, when she doesn't have children, she goes back to her father's. Who was she married to? She was married to a Yisrael. While she's married, she doesn't need truma. The husband dies, she goes back to her father's house. She can marry another kohen. She's a widow. She's not a divorcee. So she's eligible for truma if there's no children. Mishum dechasi lakuna. Aval grusha. But let's say she's divorced. She goes back to her father's house, but the lechazi lakuna, but she can't marry a kohen. I could have thought that she should not eat truma. So it has to tell me gerusha. Well, maybe just tell me gerusha. Biyashmin and gerusha, and if it would just tell me the gerusha, Grusha hu dechi islay zera layachla. Maybe a divorcee, if there's a child, she doesn't go back to her father's house. Why? Because she's not eligible to a kohen. She's divorced already. She's divorced, and there's a child from Yisrael. She doesn't go back. But a widow that theoretically could marry a kohen. I know she has a child from Yisrael, but so what? She's still eligible to a kohen, and her father's a kohen. Maybe she could still eat truma. So it's tzricha, it has to tell me almana as well. Rabbi Kiva says that pasuk is not extra. That pasuk has to tell me a chiddush, both in the almana, when the chiddush of the almana is that she can't eat if she has a child, and the gerusha that she can eat without a child. Both of those are chiddushim. That's something that I wouldn't have understood without this, and so it's not teaching me the non-Jew and the slave that invalidates the daughter of the kohen from eating truma, because that I already had from kisiya, because kisiya doesn't mean marriage.
Because they don't say anything, they agree with this.
The Rabbanan argue on Rabbi Akiva, and they held that kisiya, kedushin teifsin b'chai v'lavin, because kisiya is only telling me chai v'lavin. Almana and grusha, yeah. So what? What do the Rabbanan do with this chiddush that we get? Apparently, they understood this. Without, I don't know.
So I'm saying, you brought out a whole.
Right.
I mean, the Hava means it's technically, yeah.
Right. I'm not sure the answer. I mean, this is a very confusing topic. When do we? No, specifically your question. When do we? This is a few years of work to answer this question. When do we say that a drasha is limited, that a pasuk is limited to one drasha, and you can't get anything else out of it? And when do we say that no, the way it's read is fine, we can still read it, and we can still get another drasha out of it. Sometimes we can get several drashas out of one word, sometimes we can't. You'd have to go through the examples of each one. Yeah, this would take a little bit of time. The Malbim claims that he's worked out how the drashas work according to diktuk. He has theories that when do we have a drasha? Only if the verb is this with the prefix and the thing, and then he has a cheshbon. He's worked out how the drasha. Otherwise, for us, I mean, we just look at a pasuk and say, "Oh, okay." The Gemara says that word teaches me. Well, how does that teach me? He has the theories of how it's worked out. The nuances in the grammar. Okay, ve'iman nivala lepastala af b'machzir gerusha. This Gemara's question is based on some knowledge that we're supposed to have from other places. It turns out that if there's a woman that's married and divorced, and she gets married again, she gets divorced again, and then she goes back to her first husband.
Oh, wow.
Now, even though she just had relations with someone that was forbidden to her, but she's still eligible for truma. Now, since we're supposed to have known this is a Mishnah or a Gemara somewhere else. So the Gemara asks, you just told me that a woman that had relations with someone that was forbidden to her, which that example was a mamzer or a nasin or a mitzri, or someone that you wasn't supposed to marry in, and now she can't eat truma because she can't go back to her father's house because she's forbidden. She had just had this forbidden relations. What about if she had relations with someone that was forbidden to her, for example, her ex-husband, after she's been married again? Apparently, according to everything that we're saying, she should be forbidden, and we know that she's permissible. The Gemara says, to a stranger, this man is no stranger. This was her original husband, that was originally permitted to her. Who is prohibited to her that would invalidate her? Only someone that had a problem from birth. Why? He was a mamzer, he was a nasan, he was a ger mitzri, those are the problem. That was always forbidden. But this man was originally permitted to her, which is correct. She had married him. This person was not originally forbidden. Okay. Once you're limiting it to this, now Chalal the lavzar hu mikara lavzar hu mikara lavzar hu lay lifsel. Now listen to this. Okay.
Oh, you ready, guys?
No, it's just you know this. It's like a twist in this. If
Some of us, they were.
if a kohen has a forbidden relations and he has a child, that child becomes a chalal. Now it depends. I mean, the father's a kohen, but the child is not. Now, what's the limitations on that child? So, I'm sorry. So it depends. If it's a boy, then basically there's no significance. Just that he's not a Kohen. He can go to the cemetery. It's fine. He's not a Kohen. He can marry whoever he wants.
Is he a Levi?
No, he's not. He's Bnei Aaron, but not a Kohen. Now he can marry a Bas Kohen. Even though he's a Chalal, but he can marry a Bas Kohen. But if it's a girl, then a Kohen cannot marry her. A Chalala is usher to a Kohen. So now here we have a Bas Kohen is mutter to marry a Chalal.
Just go the other way around.
So the Gemara asks, he's not a Kohen, he's just a Yisrael. So Ihachi, Chalal, the Lav Zarhu Mikara, Lay Lefsel. If she has relations with the Chalal, she should not be usher to eat Shuma. 1 second. How is she usher to eat Shuma? A Chalal makes her usher to eat Shuma. Did we say that? That a Chalal makes her usher to eat Shuma? Yeah. Yeah, that's what we said. In the Brisa. If she has relations with the Chalal, she can't go back to her father's house to eat Shuma. So we're saying, 1 second, if you're limiting who's allowed to go eat Shuma is only someone that was forbidden to her originally from birth, this was a permissible marriage. The whole case is the whole halacha is a little bit odd. Someone that she's allowed to marry makes her forbidden to eat Shuma forever. It's interesting halacha, no? Gemara says, Amar Kra layachal zari ba'amav. He should not make his descendants chalal into chalalim. Makish zari loy. Mahu paisel. Af zari nami paisel. Talking about a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol makes if he lives with a widow, or even a widow, right, or a divorcee, his children become chalalim. So we make a comparison between layachalal zarai ba'amav, or maybe in the word zarai itself, to the Kohen Gadol himself. The descendants to the father, to the Kohen Gadol. The descendant is a chalal. So just like the father if the father lives with an almana, he turns her into a halala. So also the descendants, he turns her into a halala, which she can't eat truma. Also, the descendants will turn whoever they live with into a halala as well, and they can't eat truma.
Someone who's a widow is a halala?
No,
I thought it was
a
just
widow
someone
that
who's a-
lives with a kohen gadol becomes a halala. She has to live with someone that's prohibited to her.
Okay.
So just like the kohen gadol causes that the woman that he lives with, the widow is forbidden, so to the children, the descendants of that will also cause the women to be forbidden to eat truma.
It's transferable. It's
Yeah.
a generation.
Right.
Starts the whole generation.
The Gemara
Is
says,
it-
yeah, I'm sorry.
Is it the same that she's really prohibited to him?
Is the
Is it the
prohibition
same
on
that
her as well?
Is there?
Anyone know the answer to that? When it comes to a kohen, yeah, when it comes to a kohen, there's a prohibition of the kohen to marry a divorcee. Is that prohibition on the divorcee as well? I know she's assisting him in the prohibition, but it seems like it's a prohibition of the kohenim. Is it a prohibition on everyone, or is it his? What happens then? Do they both get lashes? I mean, like, how does that work? It could be. I mean, it says v'kidashta kadoshim yiyu. I think it's an obligation on all of us to make them holy. Yeah.
Animal, they said the animal won't stick.
No, but that was something else.
Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, Peru is only on the man, and she just assists. When on all forbidden relations, the prohibition is on both. And in all forbidden relations, the prohibition is on both, the man and the woman. So it must be on both over here as well. Okay, now the Gemara says, "Ve'ima mishas avoya." How do you know that this is only? How do you know that this applies even to a relations? Maybe it only applies to a marriage. The kohen gadol marries a widow. The Gemara says, "Well, dumya the kohen gadol. It's not true. Kohen gadol ba'almana dumya the kohen gadol ma kohen gadol ba'almana bebiyah hainami bebiyah." A kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. A regular kohen is. Kohen gadol not. So, but what's the prohibition of the kohen gadol? The marriage or the relations? So he said, well, by a kohen gadol, it's the relations. So therefore, by all of these cases, we're being quite strict here. We're saying a woman has relations. She becomes invalid for each truma for the rest of her life. She never even got married to him. She was just had relations once.
Yeah.
That it has to be a marriage?
We learn differently how the issue was the act of being married or the act of actually married.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the act of actual marriage.
Being married in the house.
No, it's like the issue of lighting Shabbos candles. That's candles be lit or lighting the candles. It's not the same issue. The issue is married or getting married. Getting married.
Just to go.
Well, with candles, it's lahad, it's not al hadla.
I'm saying there's a question about why it's done.
This is the language of the promise that, lahad is the action, it's not-
Okay.
It's an action.
This is another discussion on a lot about this issue. About twats.
Armlo in Niskash of Minanasu and Psulis.
You be married without marrying. There was one.
Yeah, but Reb Naftali is bringing up. Well, one second. Let me just give you the answer over here, and then I'll it says, "Dumi the kohen gadol, ma kohen gadol ba'almana bebiyah, hainami bebiyah." The Gemara says, "Me'ima adika havaya ubiyah." Maybe you need both, marriage and then the relations, which is the problem. It says, "No, dumi the kohen gadol ba'almana, ma kohen gadol ba'almana bebiyah lechudei, hainami bebiyah lechudei." The kohen gadol, the relations is just the what's forbidden A Kohen Gadol with a widow is the relations, not the marriage. Naftali is bringing up that it's not true, because based on what we learned before, that if a Kohen
It's on
Gadol,
the side here.
Naftali.
no, if a person was betrothed to a woman, a Kohen, and then he gets elected. I don't know how that works, but he becomes the Kohen Gadol, and that woman that he was betrothed to before he was selected or elected to be the Kohen Gadol was a widow, so he was totally permissible to marry her. And then he becomes a Kohen Gadol. The Mishnah said that he can finish the marriage. Now, if the prohibition is the bia, the relations, then how could the Mishnah say that? We were learning that the prohibition is the marriage. And now you're telling me it's not the marriage. Now you're telling me that it's the relations. I don't know the answer. Is there any notes in there? You see any notes about this?
Well, isn't it because the fact that she's betrothed now, she's no longer prohibited. Had she not been betrothed, then that would have been the prohibition.
Yeah. So the fact that she's betrothed makes her not a widow, and she's now permitted. She's already in the marriage. The widowhood status goes off. That must be the pshat, right? Is that what you meant to say? That she's like as if she's not a widow now. She's married to if she would not have been betrothed, then she would have had that prohibition. That's a good answer. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to discuss two other opinions that we had in the Brisa. One opinion was Rabbi Yossi, and the other opinion was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and they both said something very similar. We'll see what they meant. Rabbi Yossi, Aimer, Kol Shazari Pasel Paisel. We gave a whole list of people that are prohibited to marry. We said that if a woman has relations with them, she can't eat truma. Now we're saying, Rabbi Yossi says, not each of those people would prohibit the woman. It depends. If it would prohibit the children, if the children would be pasal, Kol Shazari Pasel, Paisel. If the children would pasal, then this person also pasels. Let's take a look at what that means. What is the difference between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi? We're talking about is the second generation Mitzri, second generation Adaimi. Their children are permissible to marry into the congregation because that's already the third generation. It's only the second generation that wasn't allowed. So what happens? The whole case is strange. It turns out that someone converts. He's a Mitzri. He converts. He's not allowed to marry into the congregation, but he does anyway. Or he has relations with someone. And then they have a child. That person is still not allowed to marry him, but he does anyway. Then they have it, right? So there's a second gen, and then right, that's what's going on. So the third generation is permissible. So Rabbi Yossi says that since the third generation is permissible, then the second generation doesn't invalidate, because only someone that the child would have. Tanakama, we learned from a Kohen Gadol. Tanakama serve a Kohen Gadol Balmana Shabiyasi Baveru Paisel, prohibited relations and invalidates. Afainami Paisel, this person is also prohibited and invalidates. Rabbi Yossi serve a Kohen Gadol. It's just like a Kohen Gadol. Ma Kohen Gadol Shazari Paisel Shazari Pasel Paisel. Just like a Kohen Gadol, that the descendants of that forbidden relations turn the child into a chalal. Afkol Shazari Pasel Paisel. It doesn't matter. Any forbidden relations is going to invalidate. No, I'm sorry. It's only like the Kohen Gadol that if the children would be pasal, which that's what happens by the Kohen Gadol. The According to Rabbi Yossi that he's learning from the Kohen Gadol, he says that the Mitzri Sheni is slightly different because the Mitzri Sheni doesn't have invalid children. If you can marry the daughter, you can marry the widow. That's what he says. What's going on over here? What's the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? You see, Rabbi Yossi says you can marry the daughter. Rabbi Yossi also said that. If it's a Mitzri Sheni, then the third generation is permissible. So he didn't say daughter, he said third generation. So Marula Gera Maini Mayav Yakabinaya. The difference between them is a convert from Amin and Mayav. And they compare it to the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi says, the Kohen Gadol marrying the Almana, the children are pasul. Also, anyone whose children are pasul, which is the convert from Amin, the children are pasul, they're also Amini. So they're pasul. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Savar Kohen Gadol Balmana shekol zari pasul pasul. The Kohen Gadol that marries Almana, all the children are pasul. Af kol, you have to add in a word over here. Af kol shekol zari pasul. Also, anyone that all the children are pasul. Lafuke amen mayavi then kol zari pasul damarmar amani lemeyavis meyav lemeyavis. Some of the children are kosher. If it's a girl, it's kosher. Shimon Gamliel says that a ger because the daughter of a ger Amain and Mayav is permissible, so relations with the ger Amin and Mayav would still not invalidate the woman from Truma. It's not comparable to what an almana, what a Kohen Gadol does to an almana. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah. At least the beginning is easy. Someone that rapes or seduces, that would apply to a young girl. Or an imbecile, someone that's not fully doesn't. What is it? Cognizant. So they don't affect the woman if they have relations with the woman. In other words, even a baskayan, if he's a kayan, just because he had relations with a Israelis doesn't mean that she's now allowed to eat shumah. He didn't marry her. If he marries her, it's a different story. This was
Didn't we say before, like any other relationships that's not considered marriage, quote unquote? That
would only be if that man was a prohibited man for her to marry. Here, this is a guy.
Like it's not even a marriage.
Right. This is but here, this is a fellow that could be a shidduch for her.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
It's not the best character, but could be a shidduch. So she doesn't become invalid. Yeah, we've mentioned this, that a lot of women don't know this. They think they can't marry a kohen because they had relations with someone. So who was that person? Depends. If it was someone that was valid, someone that they could have potentially married, then they're still permissible to a kohen.
And if she is seduced, does that mean it's?
That meant that she was a young girl. No, it's a young girl that's seduced. She wasn't forced.
Yeah.
It's as if today we would call it rape as well, and the Gemara even calls it like that. Okay. But if they're people that are not able to marry into the congregation, then that's a different story. Then they would invalidate her from eating truma. Ketzad, what's the story? It's supposed to say Hare Yisrael Shabal Bas Kayan. The Yisrael that lives with a daughter of a Kayan. Teichel b'truma. She can still eat truma. Ibra, if she became pregnant from that, well, lay teichel b'truma. Now she can't eat truma. How do you know this? We said kinu reha. Remember we said She's not even married to him. But this child, this pregnancy causes her that she can't eat truma because the child is the Yisrael. The child dies. It says cut up inside of her. Teichal, she can now eat truma. She's back to being not pregnant. Haya kohen shabal bas Yisrael. Let's go the other way. A kohen that lives with a regular Jewish girl. Lo teichal b'truma. She can't eat truma. She didn't marry him. Ibra, she's pregnant from him. Lo teichal, she still can't eat. Why? Because it's only after the birth. Yolda teichal. Nimtza koiches shel ben gadol mishalav. The child has more strength than the father. The child causes her, because the child is a real kohen. The father was a kohen. They were never married, but the child causes that she can eat truma. Okay, let's leave it right here by Ha'evet.
Whoa.
We'll do this.
Whoa. Cliffhanger.